I didn't grow up here, but I moved here when I was just barely 9 years old. My mother and father were married in the temple, and so we grew up, all of our family was active. I always knew I'd marry someone that was a member of the church. That was probably my best goal. I actually didn't go to college. I went to business school, Merit Business School, and became a secretary. Then when my dad did become the patriarch, I took down all his blessings. That was before they did it on the tape. And so I'd have to take it down in shorthand and then type it up and give it to him. We lived on the same street this was after I was married that he became a patriarch.
Then he corrected it?
Well, yeah, he'd look it over, and it was pretty, luckily I could do shorthand pretty good then. And I'd go like that if he was going too fast.
And then after it was,
then we'd mail it into Salt Lake, quarterly, I think. And if you wanted to be paid, they would pay you, but I'd always say, no, I enjoyed doing it, and I got a nice letter from President McKay and, the general authorities, and each, time we'd send it in. Well, actually, I didn't go out with boys that weren't members of the church, and there weren't a lot of them, you know what I mean? They'd have to, if my dad knew them and knew they were nice, that was okay, but. Grant was in the service in the Coast Guard, and his sister, Laprelle Moody, lived in our ward where we met over the Masonic Hall. And so when he'd be off on the weekends, he'd come to church there, so I met him at church. So when he asked me if I wanted to go to the show, I said sure. So we went to the show, and then we just kind of kept on going there. But when I heard him bear his testimony, I said, that's the one for me. He was nice to Laprelle's little kids, and he was nice to Sister Hall, the old lady that took care of him when Laprelle had to go off on business with Manton. So I knew he'd be nice to me when I was old, and he'd be good to our kids. And then he bore his testimony, and I thought, that's the one for me. Had a good, strong testimony, which was important. I was a counselor in the primary presidency, and I was a secretary in Relief Society, and I was a stake secretary in Relief Society, and various, I actually wasn't ever the president. I think it was because I'm kind of always used to think I was kind of glad because I couldn't drive, and that would have been hard. Yeah, that was fun. They actually called Grant and I to help in that branch when they first moved over, the Vietnamese, the Laotians, and the Cambodians, when they all came over. And it was for like a 2-year mission. And we would go, and I was a homemaking counselor, I think, for Sister Schlag, I believe, was the president then. And your wife actually gave quite a few of the lessons. And the children didn't want to leave their moms to go to a little place and be taught by themselves. So I'd sit down on the floor and I'd tear out little paper dolls out of paper and stuff like that and kind of entertain them while Sharon was giving the lesson. Then we finally got them to go, When they were going to choose a bishop for the new Maxwell Park ward that was going to be organized that time. My dad was on the High Council then, and I guess the High Council used to give talks when the general authorities would come, and they'd come quite often in those days because there weren't as many members of the church. So he had given a talk, and then President Wright, he was the president then, stake president, he called up and said to my dad, they want you to speak at conference this Sunday. And my dad said, well, it isn't my turn, I spoke last time. And he said, well, Joseph Fielding Smith is going to be here, and I don't know, maybe it was Harold B. Lee, because Harold B. Lee was the one that set my dad apart as a patriarch. And I guess they just wanted to feel of their spirit. And so at that meeting, they called on Brother Potts. They had already announced that Robert T. Payne would be the bishop of the Maxwell Park ward. And he got up to speak, and he put his hands up in the air above his head and said, "I prophesy according to the Lord Jesus Christ that this new Bishop Robert T. Payne will become one of the most spiritual bishops, and this will become one of the most spiritual wards in the church." And then he put his hands down and went on and gave his talk. And I've never heard that before, and I've never heard it since, so I thought that was sort of special, but that was my dad. He was sort of special. Lots of people thought so besides me.